You know, for decades, educators have been on this quest for the holy grail of teaching, right? The one perfect method that's going to create the absolute best students. Well, today, we're going to dive into why that entire quest might just be based on a myth. And it all kind of starts with a question where the stakes, well, they couldn't possibly be higher. I mean, in fields like medicine and dentistry, you're not just trying to improve test scores. You're building practitioners who are going to one day hold lives in their hands.
And for the longest time, the prevailing wisdom was that if you could just find the right way to teach, the perfect curriculum, the perfect classroom setup, you could transform students from just passive memorizers into truly brilliant critical thinkers.
Okay, but is that actually true? A group of researchers decided to find out by doing a massive, systematic review of all the existing evidence, putting this core belief right under the microscope.
And they didn't just look at one or two studies. Nope. They analyzed 49 different peer-reviewed papers.
And their analysis covered a huge time frame. We're talking 23 years of educational research, from the year 2000 all the way to 2023. So, long story short, this is probably the most comprehensive look we have at what we thought we knew.
Now, to really get what they found, we first have to understand the different ways students approach learning. The research kind of categorizes them into three main types.
So, first up, you've got the deep learner. Think of this person as the detective. They're driven to truly understand the why behind things. Then you have the surface learner. We all know this one. It's the classic crammer, motivated by the fear of failing, just memorizing enough to pass. And finally, there's the strategic learner. This person is a master strategist, totally focused on getting top grades, and they'll use whatever approach works best to get there.
All right, so with those learner types in mind, let's take a look at the huge educational reform that swept through universities, especially in those really demanding fields like medicine. So this was the big experiment, a major shift away from old-school traditional lectures, where students just sit there and passively get information, towards a new school model of student-centered learning. The theory was pretty simple. Get students actively involved, and you'll turn them all into deep learners. And this wasn't just talk, it meant real, concrete changes. Things like problem-based learning, or PBL, where students tackle actual real-world cases in small groups. It also meant more hands-on clinical teaching. And, of course, a flood of online e-learning resources for self-directed study. The goal for all of these was really clear. Kill the crammer, create the detective. So, after decades of this massive shift, did it actually work? Let's get to the verdict. Did moving to all this problem-based, hands-on, student-centered stuff actually succeed in pushing students towards that coveted, deep approach to learning? The answer was a resounding, well, no. Or at least, not in the simple, direct way that everyone had hoped for. The study's conclusion was blunt. After analyzing decades of research, the evidence was clear. There's no magic bullet. There is no single best way to teach. And this really shows us why. Whether it was the new methods like problem-based learning or just old-school lectures, the result was pretty much the same. Every single method produced deep learners, surface learners, and strategic learners. There just was no clear winner. So this leads to a really fascinating question. If the teaching method isn't the key factor, then what is? What actually determines if a student crams or if they truly understand? The study found that other factors were way more powerful. Things like a crushing workload, which can force even the most curious deep learner to just start cramming to survive. Intense pressure, stress, and even the student's own maturity level and how they perceive the material all had a bigger impact than the teaching style. And here's the crucial insight. These labels, deep, surface, strategic, they aren't fixed personality traits. The research shows they're actually flexible states. A student can be a deep learner in a subject they love, but then become a surface learner for a class they find overwhelming or just plain irrelevant. They adapt to their circumstances. So, if we can't engineer the perfect learner just by changing the classroom, what's the alternative? Well, the study suggests a radical and really powerful new direction. The new goal isn't about finding the perfect external method. It's about empowering students from the inside out. It's about teaching them the cognitive neuroscience of how their own brains actually learn, how they consolidate information, and how they perform under pressure. This means giving students the operating manual for their own minds, teaching them that their brain is plastic and it can literally change, showing them the power of things like spaced repetition and active retrieval practice. That's pulling information out, not just passively putting it in. And crucially, teaching them to manage the very things that derail learning, like chronic stress and lack of sleep.
Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought. After all these decades of chasing the perfect curriculum, maybe the biggest leap forward in education is to shift our focus from obsessing over what we teach to finally teaching students the science of how they learn.